Okay, we take a look at now at lesson 4.3. This is on a famous formula called the quadratic formula. Here's what it looks like. It looks very complex. And it's important to know what we use the quadratic formula for. In the previous lessons, we were finding zeros, x-intercepts for quadratic equations. And we were doing that via or using factors or factored forms to find out x-intercepts. And so these x-intercepts in mathematics are a very important part of solving problems when you're using graphs or realizing you need to find certain values depending upon the situation where the graph hits the x-axis, and so we need these x-intercepts. So the quadratic formula is used for a quadratic equation. It's a formula where you just plug numbers in and then you get an answer. So you're not really doing algebra anymore, you're doing computations. The formula solves for the x-intercepts for quadratic equation, for all quadratic equations. For example, when you have a quadratic equation, when you solve for it, you set the quadratic equation equal to 0. Set it equal to 0, just like in a form like this. If you solve it, the answers to the question, the answers to your x values, the x values you get are the x-intercepts for this equation. X-intercepts for this equation. So you can see the math. So it really just comes about identifying A, B, and C from your quadratic equation after it's set equal to 0. That's the most important piece. It first needs to be equal to 0. And then you take those numbers, the A, the B, and the C, and you substitute them into this equation. Once you do, you just got to follow your calculations, keep track of them, make sure you're using a calculator. And then notice there's a value symbol here, this one here, the plus or minus, which signifies that there are actually two solutions. And so some people like to simplify it, notice here, in one step until you get to this very end where you're then going to simplify. But in the end, keep in mind you're solving for two problems here. One where you just add, and then one where you subtract. So you notice we end up with two problems, and there's your two solutions. So you just want to practice entering. Make sure you're using Desmos or some calculator where you can enter these values in. And so you see my completed work there of how I took the A values and then substituted into the equations. And then you get your solutions. Notice these are whole numbers, these are decimals. Quite often you end up with decimal values. And so look at part C here, where before I could use the quadratic equation, I needed to set this equation equal to 0. That needed to be completed first. And then you substitute the values into this equation here. So that was an important piece here, where you first had to set the equation equal to 0, and then you go ahead and solve for your x-intercepts. That's what the x is equal to. Those are the x-intercepts for the quadratic equation like that there. Now notice again you get these decimal values. I want to show you that you can use Desmos to check your work. So let's take this one for example, negative 2x squared, and I'm going to put it into the equation y equals negative 2x squared, y equals negative 2x squared plus 3x plus 6 plus 3x plus 6. And then notice the graph comes in, and then these you could check your answers that we get there. Negative 1, let me make sure we type that all in correctly. Negative 1. And so you can see, oh shoot, we're already checking that I did something incorrect. And so now we can check our answer again. So I entered this in, I get 2.64, and then let's check on Desmos again. So I type that in there as we get there, and I do get the same answers here. And notice I just rounded to negative 1.14, 2.63, 2.64. So we do have the same answer. But again, that's how you can use Desmos to check. These are the x-intercepts. That's what that solution is getting us there. And so here are some more problems here. I'm just going to let you so you can see in the video. There are tons of videos on other videos online too of quadratic formula you can walk through. The key thing is being able to identify A, B, and C, substituting into the quadratic equation, which you don't have to memorize, just know how to use it. And then you end up with answers to check. So again, I did this, and it's always easy to make some mistakes you want to check. So if you find any mistakes, let me know in the video here again, because with all these calculations, you're bound to make a mistake somewhere. So you have this one here. You could pause and take a look at how I substituted the values. This is a positive 9. Be careful here with the negative values. This is here a positive 16. Be careful how you enter those in. This one we did above, up on 1a. And again, what we're solving for are x-intercepts, and that's what those x values are. And so you can see when you substitute in, these are the numbers you should get.